Earbuds. I can hear all the hardcore audiophiles being like, boo, get these out of here. These are cheap earbuds that I got at 7-Eleven. Don't worry, they're not actually the subject of today's review. These are clearly knocking off Apple EarPods. I mean, look at the woman on the box who's pretending to like these. Damn, these sound so bad it knocked her the fuck out. Generally, people seem to prefer IEMs for portable listening. They offer really good isolation, a consistent audio delivery because of how they seal, and they're comfortable. Plus, you can get some really great sounding IEMs for cheap, like the Tongzu 1er or the Moondrop Chu 2. People also tend to think that IEMs just sound better than flathead earbuds. Earbuds like these just have a reputation for not sounding all that great. Plus, the sound delivery on these is entirely dependent on how they fit, and people just don't like that. So there's not a huge amount of demand for this style of earbud. Yeah, I will admit, these ones here, well, to say that they don't sound all that great would be akin to calling a blowtorch a little bit toasty. Technically true, though still a gross understatement. But there's scenarios where IEMs aren't the best. Like, what if you're at work or outside and you need to be able to hear your surroundings? IEMs are terrible in situations like that. I have a day job, and I do use my IEMs at work, and it tends to piss off my coworkers because they need to be able to talk to me, and I need to be able to hear them. I'm responsible, I swear. So that got me thinking, are there affordable earbuds that offer high quality sound that's on par with IEMs and are comfortable enough to get me through a work shift? I asked around Discord and various forums for recommendations, and a lot of the ones I got were for brands that I had never heard of. Many of them were like sub $30, which didn't inspire me with confidence. I was about to give up when I was browsing YouTube one day and saw a video for an interesting product from a brand that I actually recognized, which, as many of you may have guessed from the title of this video, is the product I ended up buying, the Dunu Alpha 3. Dunu is a reputable brand and is one of the biggest players in the chi-fi space, along with other brands like Theo and Moondrop, except Dunu has been in the game for longer than both of those companies. They make the Talos and the Titan S, which are proper Audiophile approved gear. So, I saw that they made a pair of high-fidelity earbuds, and I had to try them, so I bought them. Well, watch out, Apple earbuds, it looks like you may finally have some competition. And yes, I did end up buying a new pair of earpods just for this review. Shout out to my local Walmart for being within walking distance and having them in stock. These were not cheap. These are $80, so that's like Moondrop Aria 2 territory. That's Dunu Titan S money. That's 10 Hi-Fi T3 Plus money I'm talking about. They are affordable, but you know, $80 is relatively still a lot of money. And you know, for a set of earbuds, it's like, As someone who spends my own money to make these reviews, I tend to buy products that I think I'm gonna like, but I bought these having absolutely no clue if I was going to like them. Are they worth it? And are they a suitable alternative to IEMs? Well, let's find out. Starting off, let's talk about the building comfort. The build quality of the Dunu Alpha 3 is quite nice. One of the things I admire about it is how this is a unique design. It's got this kind of prism aesthetic going on, and it's really low-key and kind of classy looking. I'm a huge fan of this design from a pure look standpoint. The whole build is made of metal too, and it feels quite solid, and it actually has a little bit of weight to it. The cable actually feels really good. It's not luxurious by any means, but it is quiet and feels fairly sturdy. It's also thin and it's light, so it's not gonna have enough weight to pull the buds out of your ears. It's about in line with other cables that ship with IEMs in this price range, so all in all, can't complain. However, the cable is non-removable, which is a little bit of a bummer, but non-removable cables are typical of this earbud style. Luckily, if you want a balanced cable, you can order one with a 4.4mm balanced cable. It's attached. You're gonna have to deal with it. You also get these foam bits that do in fact have an impact on tuning, and they also provide additional comfort. By the way, for this review, I am using them mostly without any of the foam pads, so I just want to make that disclaimer before we talk about sound. Oh yeah, you also get this really nice case. Yes, good. It's a hard case that takes up a decent amount of surface area, but it is really thin and I can fit it into my coat pocket. But it's a very sturdy case and it's good for storage, so big ups to Dunu for including this. Comfort on these I think will vary person to person. Again, with this style of earbud, there are some people who find these really comfortable and there are others who hate these. For me personally, I do find these comfortable. Once I get them in the right spot, they just kind of sit there and I totally forget about them. They feel a bit heavy, but the majority of the weight is pointed downward, so they're actually very balanced and they fit securely. But if you normally find this style of earbud uncomfortable, chances are you're probably not gonna like the fit on these. So to answer one of these questions, yes, I can wear them through an entire work shift, no problem. Good. Okay, so let's talk about the most important factor, sound quality. After all, what good good as the built-in comfort if the sound is shit. I bet there's a few of you out there who are like, oh man, I hope he just destroys these. I bet they're gonna sound like shit. Blood! We want blood! Well, sorry to disappoint those people, because these are among the best sounding earbuds I've ever listened to. Oh man, Apple EarPods Dunu Alpha 3 is gunning for your spot at the top. Will it be enough? The tuning of the Alpha 3 earbuds is frankly excellent. Sorry, I don't have a graph for these, so you're just gonna have to listen to me ramble on without the hard measurements. I know. So overall, the sound signature of the Alpha 3 is very warm and rich, with a focus on the upper mid-range. I can understand why they tune it this way. If you're out and about, the hardest bit of the music to hear is the bass, so they compensate for that by giving us just a little bit extra, which makes a lot of sense. This results in a sound signature that's warm and thumpy, which is a tuning style that I personally like very much when it's executed correctly, and fortunately, there is no mid-bass blow. However, because they don't have a seal, it does sound as though there's a significant roll-off in the sub-bass, so they sound warm and have a good amount of thump, but they're lacking in low-end rumble, which is something I also expected, as these are akin to being like an open-back headphone, but in the form factor of an earbud, so naturally bass extension isn't going to be the best. But still, you know, bass on these is quite pleasant. They also have a very forward upper mid-range and lower treble. Lead instruments and vocal presence is the Dunu Alpha 3's greatest strength. Female voices through this earbud sound simply angelic and breathy, and male vocals sound full and warm. It's just enough to make vocals and lead instruments pop, but it avoids getting into shoutiness territory. Dunu tuned this with just a bit of extra bass to compensate for background noise, but the focus of the tuning is mainly on the mid-range. I'm not sure if you could tell simply based upon the fact that I'm a VTuber, but you know, I'm somewhat of a degenerate fucking weeb. Again by Yui from the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood soundtrack. That song sounds so good through these. Like, yeah, baby, that's good shit right there. It's not just Yui's vocals that sound super breathy and angelic, but that guitar line, it sounds just really crisp and forward. So, if you like mid-range forwardness, the Dunu Alpha 3 will definitely satisfy. Treble on the Alpha 3 is pretty revealing. It's well extended, and there are times on certain tracks where it just barely gets into sibilance territory, though I don't usually find it to be a problem if I'm listening at a safe volume. On tracks where cymbals are mixed just a little bit hot, it can be a bit too much. It's not constant though, just on certain rock and jazz tracks. It's definitely not a deal breaker though, and it's certainly not as severe as something like a Bear Dynamic or some AKG headphones. Certainly not as bright as something like a Let Shore S12. On the flip side, it's gonna give the Alpha 3 more perceived detail. Vocals have some added crispness and breath due to this, and a lot of those small micro details in recordings are definitely a lot more noticeable. On modern recordings, that's gonna be a really cool aspect, but on old recordings that weren't produced on good equipment, it's definitely gonna bring out the flaws in those recordings. If you like black metal, this is going to make those recordings sound even worse than they already do, which some black metal fans might have just heard me say and are all like, oh, fuck yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. That is my shit right there. Oh, by the way, black metal fans, here's a fun game you can play. Just Google your favorite band's name and see what controversy pops up. Trust me, this game is super fun. Its technical performance is a bit of a mixed bag. There's some things it does really well at, and some things it's not so good at. So let's start with the good, soundstage. Unlike IEMs, which tend to sound like they're just coming from inside your head, these actually sound fairly wide and open. Drums in particular sound like they're significantly farther away than some other instruments. It's a pretty cool experience to get decent soundstage from an earphone. They're not incredibly wide, but it is wider than a Sennheiser HD600, so neato. Another thing it's good at is information and detail retrieval. I mentioned this earlier, but it seems to do a good job of bringing small details in recordings to the forefront. Things like the sound of guitars echoing off the walls of the room where it's being recorded, or the snare on a snare drum resonating with an upright bass. Those kinds of details are really cool to hear. Now, onto the stuff it's not so good at. Imaging. It's pretty mediocre when it comes to providing positional information. Not a whole lot of that going on. Instrument separation is also pretty lackluster. A good good chunk of instruments sound as though they're sort of smushed together. I've definitely listened to IEMs that are superior in terms of both imaging and instrument separation that cost about the same or even cheaper. Timbre is another area where it could be better. Instruments do sound correct, though the sound quality is still pretty artificial. It's not bad, it's just not quite as natural sounding as I was hoping it was going to be. One thing I do have to bring up for the people who like to listen to their music loud and people who like to use EQ, these have a significant amount of distortion if you try to push them. I was curious how they would perform with EQ, and all I did was try increasing the low bass by just a few decibels, in addition to decreasing some of the upper treble to make it just a bit more palatable. As soon as I did, the sound got super fuzzy and distorted, and it was not very good. This was out of my Qtelix 5K, which has a pretty clean sound to it. The DAC in that thing is really good, so I was getting pretty noticeable distortion listening out of a device that's not really known for distortion after adding just a tiny bit of EQ. I know some people like distortion. In some cases, it gives that old school analog vibe. You know, tube amps and vinyl have distortion, but I draw the line when there's distortion and I specifically don't want to hear it at that time. And the Alpha 3, it did that. What if you wanted to listen to EQ, but God said, the distortion isn't noticeable if you listen at safe listening volumes and you don't use EQ, but if you want to use EQ, you may have to put up with some distortion if distortion is something you don't like. Do I recommend it? Whether I recommend it or not is entirely dependent on your use case. Honestly, I still think most IEMs are going to sound better than the Dunu Alpha 3. In scenarios where you can use IEMs, I wouldn't recommend it. The performance of IEMs is it's still just going to sound a tad bit better. And if you love your IEMs, then you have no reason to buy these. Besides, maybe you're just curious and want to try something different. Plus, that distortion is going to be a huge deal breaker for some people who like to use EQ. I mean, for the price of these, you could also get a Truthier Hexa, or hell, Dunu also makes an IEM at this price, the Titan S. But if you really like this style of earbud, or you need an earphone that doesn't block out noise so you can still hear your surroundings, this is among the best I've heard. And for these people specifically, I wholeheartedly recommend it. The sound quality is still pretty damn good, but you know, now the real question, is it better than the Apple EarPods? Has the champion finally met its match? You know, I've been going back and forth a lot since I got the Alpha 3, and after giving it some careful consideration, I've decided that